Captain Marcus Cole had seen many things in his 20 years of service, but nothing had prepared him for the sight that filled the viewport of the UNS Defiance. 300 alien warships hung in the void like a wall of death, their dark hulls blocking out the distant stars. The Kethra fleet had found them. The humans had been running for 6 days. Their small convoy of 12 ships carried the last survivors of the Proxima Centauri colony, 40,000 civilians who had escaped the first wave of attacks. Now, trapped in the Orion Nebula with their FTL drives still recharging, they had nowhere left to run. "All hands, this is the captain," Marcus said into the shipwide comm. His voice was steady despite the cold fear in his gut. "We have contact with the enemy fleet. I won't lie to you. The odds are not in our favor, but we are not going to give up. We are not going to surrender our people to these monsters. We are going to fight, and we are going to find a way to survive." Lieutenant Sarah Chen stood at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. She was young, barely 30, but she had proven herself in the early battles of the war. "Captain, I'm picking up energy signatures from the Kethra ships. They're charging weapons." "How long until they're in firing range?" 15 minutes, sir." 15 minutes. Marcus looked around his bridge, at the men and women who had served with him through hell and back. They were scared. He could see it in their eyes, but they were still at their posts, still ready to fight. "Commander Wright," he said to his first officer, "get me the captains of all ships on a secure channel, and bring up everything we have on the Kethra. Every battle report, every analysis, every piece of intel we've ever gathered. If there's a weakness we can use, I want to find it." Commander Jake Wright nodded and began making the calls. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes, the kind of officer who never seemed to panic no matter how bad things got. Marcus was glad to have him at his side. The Kethra were not like humans. They were a species of insectoid warriors, each one standing nearly 3 meters tall with armored exoskeletons and multiple limbs that could wield weapons or tear through metal with equal ease. They had swept through a dozen systems in the past year, conquering or destroying everything in their path. Humanity had fought back, but they were losing. They were always losing. The Kethra did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They simply killed and moved on to the next target. The only reason the Proxima survivors had escaped was because the colony's defense fleet had sacrificed itself to buy them time. Good men and women, dead now, their ships nothing but debris floating in the void. "Captain," Sarah called out, "I've got something strange on the sensors." Marcus moved to her station. "What is it?" "The nebula, sir. It's denser than our initial scans showed. There are pockets of ionized gas and metallic particles throughout this region. I think that's why our long-range sensors have been so unreliable." Marcus studied the readouts. The Orion Nebula was one of the largest stellar nurseries in this region of space, a vast cloud of gas and dust where new stars were being born. It was beautiful, dangerous, and right now, it might be their only hope. "The Kethra sensors," he said slowly, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "How do they compare to ours?" Sarah pulled up the analysis files. "Based on our intelligence, their technology is superior in most ways, but their sensors rely heavily on electromagnetic detection. They have trouble with dense particle fields and radiation sources." "So the nebula would affect their sensors too?" "Yes, sir, probably more than it affects ours." Marcus felt the first spark of hope he had felt in days. It wasn't much, but it was something. The Kethra had numbers, they had firepower, they had technology, but they didn't know this nebula like humans could learn it. "Commander Wright, get me those captains now. I have a plan." Within minutes, the faces of 11 other ship commanders appeared on the main screen. They looked tired, scared, desperate, but they were listening. "Here's the situation," Marcus began. "We can't outrun them and we can't outfight them in open space, but we don't have to. The Kethra are used to winning through pure force. They don't adapt well to situations they haven't seen before. That's going to be their weakness. Captain Lisa Park of the UNS Resolute leaned forward. What do you have in mind, Marcus? We're going to lead them deeper into the nebula. We're going to use the gas clouds and the particle fields to hide our ships and confuse their sensors. And then we're going to hit them in ways they won't expect. That's a dangerous game, said Captain Roger Thompson of the UNS Valiant. If we get lost in there, we're as good as dead. We're as good as dead if we stay here, Marcus replied. At least in the nebula we have a chance. We have something they don't have. What's that? Marcus smiled grimly. We can think. We can adapt. We can come up with ideas they've never seen before. The Kethra fight the same way every time because it always works for them, but we're going to show them something new. He pulled up a three-dimensional map of the nebula on the main display. Here's what we're going to do. The civilian ships will go first, moving to these coordinates deep in the densest part of the nebula. The warships will form a rear guard and draw the Kethra in after us. But we're not going to fight them head-on. We're going to fight smart. For the next 10 minutes, Marcus outlined his plan. It was risky, desperate, and relied on the Kethra behaving exactly as he expected them to. But it was the only chance they had. When he finished, there was silence on the comm channel. Then Captain Park nodded. It's crazy, but I'm in. One by one, the other captains agreed. They didn't have a choice, really. It was this plan or certain death. All ships begin moving to your assigned positions, Marcus ordered. And remember, we're not trying to win this battle. We're trying to survive it. If we can make the Kethra bleed enough, if we can make them think twice about coming after us, then we've won something they can't understand. We've shown them that humans don't give up. The convoy began to move, diving into the swirling colors of the Orion Nebula. Behind them, 300 Kethra warships followed like hungry predators chasing wounded prey. But these humans were not wounded. They were desperate, yes. They were scared. But they were also thinking, planning, preparing, and in the end, that would make all the difference. The nebula closed around the human convoy like a colorful shroud. Red and orange gases swirled past the viewports, lit from within by the glow of young stars being born in the cosmic clouds. It was beautiful, but none of the crew had time to admire it. They were too busy preparing for battle. Chief Engineer Pablo Rodriguez worked frantically in the engine room of the Defiance, his hands covered in grease and his face lit by the glow of computer screens. Captain, I've modified the engine output as you requested. We can now vent plasma in controlled bursts from the rear exhaust ports. Good work, Pablo, Marcus replied over the comm. How dangerous is it? Very dangerous, sir. If the timing is wrong by even a few seconds, we could blow ourselves up instead of the enemy. Then we'll make sure the timing is right. Keep working on the other modifications. We're going to need everything we can get. Throughout the convoy, similar work was being done on every ship. The humans were turning their vessels into traps, weapons, and surprises that the Kethra had never encountered before. It was improvised and desperate, but it was also clever. On the bridge, Lieutenant Chen had been studying the nebula for the past hour. Captain, I've found something useful. There's a region about 2 hours ahead where the gas density increases sharply. It will limit visibility to almost nothing. Even our sensors will barely work in there. Perfect, Marcus said. That's where we'll make our stand. What about the Kethra? Are they still following? Yes, sir. All 300 ships are maintaining pursuit. They're staying in a tight formation. Marcus nodded. That was exactly what he had expected. The Kethra always fought in tight formations, coordinating their attacks through a central command structure. It was effective in normal circumstances, but in the nebula, it would become a weakness. They're arrogant, Commander Wright observed. They think this is just a matter of time. Chase us down, surround us, destroy us, same as always. That's what they think, Marcus agreed. Let's hope they keep thinking it until it's too late. The hours passed slowly as the convoy pushed deeper into the nebula. The gas grew thicker, the colors more intense, until it felt like they were flying through a vast, glowing ocean. The Kethra followed, patient and relentless, closing the distance bit by bit. Marcus used the time to check on the civilian ships. 40,000 people were depending on him, men, women, and children who had already lost their homes and many of their loved ones. They were crowded into transport ships that were never designed for this many passengers, living in conditions that would be considered cruel in normal times. But these were not normal times. He connected to the lead transport, the Aurora, and found himself speaking with its captain, a retired naval officer named Helen Vasquez, who had come out of retirement when the war began. "How are your people holding up?" Marcus asked. "They're scared, but they're strong," Helen replied. "They know you're doing everything you can to protect them. That gives them hope." "I just hope that hope is justified." "It is, Marcus. You're the best commander we have. If anyone can get us through this, it's you." Marcus didn't feel like the best at anything right now. He felt like a man trying to hold back an ocean with his bare hands. But he kept those thoughts to himself and signed off with words of encouragement. As they approached the dense region of the nebula, Marcus gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. Around the table sat Commander Wright, Lieutenant Chen, Chief Engineer Rodriguez, and Dr. Amanda Foster, the ship's science officer. "In 30 minutes, we'll enter the dense zone," Marcus began. "The Kethra will follow us in. That's when we spring the trap." He activated the holographic display, showing a map of the region ahead. "Dr. Foster, explain what you found." The science officer stood, her eyes bright with excitement despite the danger they faced. The dense zone contains unusually high concentrations of metallic hydrogen and ionized particles. If we ignite this mixture with the right kind of energy burst, it will create a massive explosion. Not enough to destroy the Kethra fleet, but enough to blind their sensors completely and cause significant damage to any ships in the immediate area. "How do we ignite it?" Commander Wright asked. "That's the tricky part. We need a focused energy beam at a specific frequency. I've calculated the parameters, and we can achieve it by modifying our main weapon systems, but we'll only get one shot." Marcus nodded. "One shot is all we need. Chief Rodriguez, how are the modifications coming?" "Almost done, Captain. We'll be ready in time." "Good. Here's the plan. The civilian ships will continue to the far side of the dense zone, where they'll be protected from the blast. The Defiance and the Resolute will position themselves at specific coordinates and wait for the Kethra to enter the kill zone. The other warships will scatter and hide in the gas clouds, ready to attack after the explosion." Lieutenant Chen frowned. "The Defiance and the Resolute will be very close to the blast zone. How do we survive?" "We run," Marcus said simply. "The moment we fire, we run as fast as we can. It'll be close, but we should make it." "Should?" Commander Wright raised an eyebrow. "It's the best I can offer. But even if we don't make it, the blast will still happen. The civilians will still be protected. The other ships will still have a chance to escape in the confusion." There was silence around the table. Everyone understood what Marcus was saying. The Defiance and the Resolute were willing to sacrifice themselves if necessary to give the others a chance. "I've already spoken with Captain Park," Marcus continued. "She's agreed to the plan. Her crew is preparing as we speak." Dr. Foster cleared her throat. "Captain, there's something else. I've been analyzing the Kethra communication patterns. Their ships use a centralized command structure, as we know. If we can take out their command ship, the others will be disorganized. They might even retreat." "Can you identify the command ship?" "I think so. It's larger than the others and broadcasting on multiple frequencies. It should be near the center of their formation." Marcus smiled for the first time in hours. "Then we know what our secondary target is. After the explosion, anyone with weapons capability focuses on that command ship. If we can destroy it, we might actually have a chance to survive this." The officers returned to their stations, and Marcus watched as his ship and the entire convoy prepared for battle. In the distance, the sensors showed the Kethra fleet still following, still confident, still unaware of what was waiting for them. "All ships report ready, Captain," Commander Wright announced. "We're entering the dense zone now." Marcus took a deep breath and looked out at the swirling gases ahead. Somewhere in that chaos, they would make their stand. 12 ships against 300, 40,000 lives depending on him. "This is it," he said quietly. "May God help us all." The dense zone was like nothing the crew had ever experienced. The gas was so thick that the viewports showed nothing but swirling colors of red, orange, and purple. Stars were invisible. The only way to navigate was through instruments, and even those were barely functioning. "Sensors are down to 40% effectiveness," Lieutenant Chen reported. "I can barely see the other ships in our convoy." "Good," Marcus said. "If we can barely see each other, the Kethra will have even more trouble. What about them?" "Still following, but they've slowed down. I think they're having problems with their sensors too." "But they're still coming." "Yes, sir, they're determined." Marcus nodded. That was the Kethra way. They never gave up on a hunt once they had started. It was a kind of honor for them, a proof of their warrior spirit. But right now, that determination was going to lead them straight into a trap. The civilian ships had already passed through the densest part of the nebula and were now hiding on the far side, their engines shut down to minimize their signatures. The military ships had spread out into the gas clouds, each one positioned at a specific point in Marcus's plan. The Defiance and the Resolute moved to their positions at the heart of the kill zone. They were the bait, the trigger, and possibly the sacrifice. Marcus watched as Captain Park's ship took up position 5,000 kilometers to his left, barely visible through the swirling gases. "Defiance to Resolute," he said over the secure channel. "Are you ready?" Captain Park's voice came back clear despite the interference. "Ready as we'll ever be, Marcus. My weapons officer says the modifications are complete. We can fire when you give the order." "Then we wait, let them come to us." The waiting was the hardest part. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the Kethra fleet moved closer, their massive warships pushing through the nebula like dark shadows in the glowing gas. On the sensor display, Marcus could see them beginning to spread out, trying to encircle the area where they thought the human ships were hiding. "They're entering the kill zone," Lieutenant Chen announced. "Lead ships are now within range." "How many?" "Approximately 150. The rest are following behind." "Wait for more. We need as many as possible in the zone before we fire." More waiting, more tension. On the bridge, every officer was silent, watching their screens, waiting for the order that would decide their fate. 200 ships now in the zone," Chen said. 220, 240. "The command ship." "Just entered the zone, Captain. It's in the center of their formation, as expected." Marcus gripped the arms of his chair. This was the moment. Everything they had planned, everything they had worked for, came down to the next few seconds. "All ships, this is the captain. Prepare to execute on my mark. Resolute, lock your weapons on the coordinates I'm sending now. Defiance will fire first. Resolute will fire 1 second later. The crossfire will ignite the gas." "Understood," Captain Park responded. "Weapons locked." Marcus looked at his own weapons officer. "Lock on target." "Locked, sir." He took a deep breath. "Fire." Twin beams of energy lanced out from the Defiance, cutting through the swirling gases toward a specific point in space. 1 second later, the Resolute fired its own beams, crossing the first set at exactly the right angle. For a moment, nothing happened. Marcus felt his heart stop. Then the universe exploded. The metallic hydrogen ignited in a chain reaction that spread through the dense gas zone at incredible speed. A wall of fire expanded outward in all directions, engulfing everything in its path. The brightness was blinding, turning the viewports white with light. "All power to engines! Go, go, go!" Marcus shouted. The Defiance lurched forward as Chief Rodriguez pushed the engines beyond their limits. The ship screamed through the gas, racing ahead of the expanding fireball. Behind them, the explosion continued to grow, consuming everything. "Resolute is with us," Chen shouted over the noise. "Both ships are clear of the primary blast zone." Marcus slumped back in his chair, relief flooding through him. They had made it. They had actually made it. But the battle was far from over. "Damage report on the Kethra fleet," he demanded. "Sensors are still recovering, Captain, but I'm getting readings now. The explosion destroyed at least 50 Kethra ships outright. Another 100 are damaged, many severely. The rest are scattered and disorganized." 50 destroyed, 100 damaged. In a single moment, they had reduced the enemy fleet by half. It was more than Marcus had dared to hope. The command ship. Still functional but damaged. It's trying to rally the remaining ships. "All ships attack," Marcus ordered over the fleet channel. "Target the command ship. Don't give them time to regroup." From all sides of the kill zone, the hidden human warships emerged from the gas clouds, their weapons blazing. The Kethra, still reeling from the explosion, found themselves under attack from multiple directions by enemies they could barely see. It was chaos. The swirling gases made it impossible for either side to form proper battle lines. Ships appeared and disappeared in the glowing clouds, firing at shadows and running from fires they couldn't see. But the humans had prepared for this. They had planned for it. The Kethra had not. The Defiance dove back into the battle, its weapons firing at every enemy signature that appeared on the sensors. Captain Park's Resolute was right beside them, the two ships working together like they had trained for years. "Command ship is bearing 045, Chen called out. "It's trying to escape." "Don't let it," Marcus said. "All available ships converge on that position. We end this now." The human ships swarmed toward the Kethra command vessel, dodging fire and returning it in equal measure. They took hits, some of them serious, but they kept coming. They would not be stopped. They could not be stopped. The command ship was massive, easily 5 times the size of the Defiance, and it was fighting back with everything it had. But it was damaged from the explosion, and it was surrounded by enemies who had nothing left to lose. "Target their engines," Marcus ordered. "If they can't run, they can't rally." The human weapons concentrated on the rear of the massive ship, pounding it with everything they had. Finally, something gave way. An explosion ripped through the command ship's engine section, and the great vessel began to drift. "Their engines are gone," Chen reported. "They're dead in space." "Now finish them," Marcus said grimly. "Every ship, everything you have, fire." The combined firepower of 8 human warships converged on the Kethra command vessel. For a long moment, the great ship seemed to absorb the punishment, its shields flickering but holding. Then, with a final, massive explosion, it broke apart. And just like that, the battle changed. Without their command ship, the surviving Kethra vessels fell into confusion. They had never had to think for themselves, never had to make decisions without their leaders. Now, surrounded by enemies in a hostile environment, they panicked. One by one, then in groups, the remaining Kethra ships began to retreat. They fled through the nebula, scattering in all directions, trying to escape the trap that had turned their certain victory into disaster. "They're running," Commander Wright said, disbelief in his voice. "They're actually running." Marcus watched the sensor display as the enemy signatures faded into the distance. They had done it. Against all odds, against an enemy that had never been defeated in open battle, they had won. "All ships cease fire," he ordered. "Let them go, we've done enough." On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew began to cheer. Some were crying, some were hugging each other, all were overcome with relief and joy. They had survived. They had won. Marcus allowed himself a small smile, but he knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over and the Kethra would be back. But for now, for this moment, they had proven something important. Humans could fight, humans could adapt, humans could win. And that was something the Kethra had never faced before. The aftermath of the battle was both celebration and mourning. 4 human ships had been destroyed in the fighting, their crews lost to the void. Another 3 were heavily damaged and barely able to move, but the convoy had survived. The 40,000 civilians were safe, at least for now. Marcus walked through the corridors of the Defiance, checking on his crew and assessing the damage. The ship had taken several hits during the battle, but Chief Rodriguez and his team were already working on repairs. The engineer looked exhausted but proud. "She'll fly again, Captain," Rodriguez said, patting a bulkhead affectionately. "Give me a day or 2 and she'll be good as new." "You've done incredible work, Pablo. The modifications you made saved our lives." The engineer shrugged. "That's what we do, sir. We figure things out. It's what makes us human." Marcus continued his walk, stopping to talk with crew members, offering thanks and comfort where it was needed. Many had lost friends in the battle. Many were still in shock from what they had been through. But all of them had a new light in their eyes, a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. When he returned to the bridge, Commander Wright was waiting with a report. "We've made contact with the civilian ships, Captain. All 8 transports are intact. They're waiting for us at the rendezvous point on the far side of the nebula." "Good. What's our current status?" "We have 8 military ships still operational, including the Defiance and the Resolute. The 3 damaged ones are being towed by the others. Our FTL drives will be fully recharged in approximately 6 hours. Once that's done, we can jump out of this system and head for safe space." "What about the Kethra? Any sign of them regrouping?" "None, sir. Dr. Foster has been monitoring their communications. They're scattered across the nebula, and their commanders seem to be arguing about what to do next. Without the command ship, they can't coordinate their forces." Marcus nodded, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. They had bought themselves time. Now they needed to use it wisely. A call came in from Captain Helen Vasquez on the Aurora. Her face appeared on the screen, lined with worry but also something else. Gratitude, perhaps, or wonder. "Captain Cole, I've been talking with the other transport commanders. We want to thank you for what you did. We know the risks you took." "We did what we had to do, Helen. We're all in this together." "Still, what you accomplished. People are calling it a miracle. The news is spreading through the ships. People are talking about how the humans beat the unbeatable enemy. It's giving them hope." "Hope is good," Marcus said. "We're going to need it. This war is far from over." "I know, but today we showed them something. We showed them that we can fight back, and that matters." After the call ended, Marcus sat alone in his ready room, thinking about everything that had happened. A week ago, he had been just another captain in a losing war, watching humanity get pushed back system by system. Now, he had won a battle that everyone said was impossible to win. But how? Why had it worked? The Kethra had superior numbers, superior technology, superior firepower. By every measure that mattered, they should have won. But they hadn't. Marcus thought about his crew, about the other captains, about the engineers and scientists who had improvised solutions under impossible pressure. He thought about the way they had adapted, creating new tactics on the fly, turning their environment into a weapon. That was it, he realized. That was the difference. The Kethra fought the same way every time because it always worked. They had never needed to adapt, never needed to think creatively. But humans had evolved on a world where survival meant constant change, constant innovation. It was in their blood. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Lieutenant Chen, looking exhausted but happy. "Captain, we've picked up something interesting on the long-range sensors. There's a human outpost about 3 days' travel from here. It's called Station Omega, a deep space research facility. According to our records, it was abandoned when the war started. Why is that interesting? Because it's broadcasting a distress signal, and the signal includes a code that indicates military presence. Marcus sat up straighter. There are survivors at Station Omega. It looks that way, sir. And if they've been holding out this long behind enemy lines, they might have information about Kethra movements in this sector. Or they might need rescue. That too. Marcus considered the situation. They had just won a major victory, but their ships were damaged and their resources were limited. The smart thing to do would be to head straight for safe space, link up with the main human fleet and report what they had learned. But there might be people at Station Omega who needed help, people who had been fighting alone in the darkness, waiting for rescue that never came. Could he just leave them? Lieutenant, call a meeting of all ship captains. We have a decision to make. Within the hour, the surviving captains were assembled via holographic link, their faces filling the screen in the Defiance's conference room. Marcus explained what Lieutenant Chen had found and opened the floor for discussion. It's risky, Captain Thompson of the Valiant said immediately. We barely survived the last battle. Taking on a rescue mission with damaged ships is asking for trouble. I agree with the risk assessment, Captain Park said, but we can't just abandon our own people. If there are survivors at that station, they've been holding out for months with no support. We owe them a chance. What if it's a trap? Asked Captain Anderson of the UNS Steadfast. The Kethra might be using the signal to lure us in. The code is legitimate, Chen responded. It's a military encryption that the Kethra wouldn't know. The debate continued for several minutes, with valid points on both sides. Finally, Marcus raised his hand for silence. Here's what I think, he said. 24 hours ago, we were facing certain death. We survived because we refused to give up, because we fought for each other and for the people we were protecting. That's who we are. That's what makes us human. He paused, looking at each face on the screen. If there are people at Station Omega who need our help, we have to try. We can't win this war if we lose what makes us worth fighting for. One by one, the captains nodded their agreement. Even Thompson, who had been the most skeptical, gave his support. Then it's decided, Marcus said. We'll escort the civilian ships to a safe location first, then take the combat-capable vessels to Station Omega. Let's move out. As the meeting ended and the convoy began to move, Marcus felt a new sense of purpose. They had won their first impossible victory. Now they were going to rescue their own. And maybe, just maybe, they were going to start turning the tide of this war. The Kethra had thought humans were easy prey. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Station Omega hung in the darkness like a forgotten dream. It was smaller than Marcus had expected, a collection of modules and docking arms built around a central hub, now scarred by weapons fire and emergency repairs. But lights still glowed in some of the windows, and as the human ships approached, they could see movement in the observation decks. Station Omega, this is Captain Marcus Cole of the UNS Defiance, he broadcast on the frequency the distress signal had indicated. We're responding to your call. Do you read? There was a long moment of static, and then a voice came through, rough with emotion. Defiance, this is Commander James Wu of Station Omega. We didn't think anyone would come. We've been out here for 8 months. You're not alone anymore, Commander. We're here to get you out. The docking procedures took time, but eventually Marcus was able to board the station with a team of Marines. What they found inside was both inspiring and heartbreaking. 237 people had survived on Station Omega, about half of them military and half civilian researchers and their families. They had rationed their food, jury-rigged their systems, and fought off 3 separate Kethra attacks with improvised weapons and sheer determination. Commander Wu was a small man with tired eyes, but he moved with the energy of someone who had refused to give up for a very long time. He led Marcus through the station, showing him their defenses, their supplies, and their people. "When the Kethra first came, we thought we were finished," Wu said. "We had a few security personnel and some basic weapons, nothing that should have stopped a warship, but we fought anyway. We used the station's research equipment to create interference fields, blinded their sensors, and picked off their boarding parties one by one." "You beat them with science equipment." "We beat them with whatever we had. Dr. Martinez in the physics lab figured out how to turn our particle accelerator into a weapon. Chief Kowalski in engineering built mines out of spare parts. Everyone contributed." Marcus felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was what humans did. When faced with impossible odds, they didn't surrender. They innovated, they adapted, they survived. "We're taking everyone off this station," Marcus said. "But first, I want to know everything you've learned about the Kethra. 8 months behind enemy lines means you've probably seen things no one else has." Commander Wu nodded slowly. "We have learned a lot, and some of it might change the war." Over the next several hours, Wu and his team shared their intelligence. They had intercepted Kethra communications, studied their patrol patterns, and even captured some of their technology during the boarding attacks. Dr. Martinez, a brilliant physicist with wild gray hair and bright eyes, had made the most important discovery. "The Kethra use a central network to coordinate their fleets," she explained, her hands moving excitedly as she talked. "It's not just tactical, it's biological. Their species evolved as a hive mind, individual warriors that all connect to a central intelligence. When you destroyed their command ship in the nebula, you didn't just remove their leadership. You cut them off from the network." "That's why they panicked," Marcus realized. "They literally didn't know how to think for themselves." "Exactly. And if we can find a way to disrupt their network on a larger scale, we could win the war." Dr. Martinez smiled. "I've been working on that very problem. I have some theories, but I need access to better equipment and more data. The main research facilities back in human space would be perfect." Marcus looked at the scientist with new respect. "Then you're coming with us, Doctor, and so is every piece of data and equipment you've gathered here." The evacuation of Station Omega took the rest of the day. Every person, every piece of research, every captured Kethra device was loaded onto the human ships. By the time they were finished, the convoy had grown again, now carrying not just refugees but scientists and soldiers who had proven themselves against impossible odds. As the fleet prepared to jump to FTL, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the stars through the viewport. Commander Wu had joined him there, looking out at the darkness that had been his prison for so long. "When we first heard about the battle in the nebula, we couldn't believe it," Wu said quietly. 300 Kethra ships and you beat them with 12. It seemed impossible." "It wasn't impossible," Marcus replied. "It was just very, very difficult, but that's the thing about humans. We do difficult. We do impossible. We keep fighting when anyone else would give up." "Do you think we can win this war?" Marcus thought about the question for a long moment. A week ago, he would have said no. The Kethra were too strong, too numerous, too advanced. Humanity was fighting a losing battle against extinction. But now he had seen what his people could do. He had watched them take an impossible situation and turn it into victory. He had seen scientists and engineers create weapons from spare parts and soldiers fight against overwhelming odds. He had seen hope survive in the darkness of space. "Yes," he said finally, "I think we can. It won't be easy and it won't be quick. But we have something the Kethra don't have. We have the ability to change, to adapt, to come up with ideas no one has ever thought of before. They've been winning because they've never faced an enemy like us. Now they have." The fleet jumped to FTL, leaving the Orion Nebula behind. In 3 days they would reach human space, bringing with them survivors, intelligence, and hope. Word would spread of the Battle of the Nebula, of the impossible victory against 300 ships. It would become a legend, a story that would be told for generations. But for now, Marcus Cole stood on the bridge of his ship, surrounded by his crew, leading his convoy toward home. Behind them, the Kethra were scattered and confused, their certainty of victory shattered. Ahead of them, humanity waited, ready to learn from this victory and fight even harder. Lieutenant Chen looked up from her console. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission from Earth Command. They've heard about our victory. They want to hear the full story." Marcus smiled. "Tell them they'll have to wait until we get home. This story deserves to be told in person." "Yes, sir." Commander Wright came to stand beside him. "It's going to be different now, isn't it? The whole war is going to change." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "The Kethra thought they knew everything about us. They thought we were weak, primitive, easy to defeat. They were wrong, and now they know it." He looked at his crew, at the faces of the men and women who had fought beside him through hell and emerged victorious. They were tired, battered, and forever changed by what they had experienced. But they were also proud, determined, and ready for whatever came next. "The Kethra made one mistake," Marcus said quietly. "They underestimated us. They saw our small ships and our limited technology and thought we were weak, but they didn't see what really mattered." "What's that, sir?" "Our spirit, our creativity, our refusal to give up no matter how bad things get. That's what makes humans special. That's what will win this war." The ships of the convoy sailed on through the stars, carrying their precious cargo of people and hope. Behind them, the wreckage of the Kethra fleet drifted through the nebula, a monument to human courage and ingenuity. And ahead of them, a galaxy waited to learn that humanity would not go quietly into the darkness. They would fight, they would adapt, they would survive. And in the end, they would win. Because that's what humans do.